My name is Michel'Le, and I am from the great and mighty state of Mississippi. I ended up connecting with Kayla just being on, I would say, an urgency for upgrade in Mississippi. I've worked in corrections my entire life, and I've seen so much and encountered so much. And being inside the system, you get to see things that most people don't get to see. And working inside the system, you also get to see things that most people don't get to see. And so over my years of working, I became frustrated. I became frustrated with the resources. I became frustrated with the conversations. I became frustrated with the gatekeepers, if you know what I mean. And so it caused me to not only have to reach out to other states and start doing my own research, but I believe that it's the one thing that has fueled my fire now to never shut my mouth when it comes to the state of where we are in corrections and the state of where we are in communities today. And so I'm going to unpack a lot, and it is very emotional. And I like to give that disclaimer, but I would never stand in front of an audience and not be transparent to who I am and what I've been through. I do not believe in candid conversations. Healing cannot take place unless we rip off the Band-Aids. And transparency and honesty and vulnerability is one of the ways that we can begin to plant seeds of seeds of healing in people. And so I tell my story because I don't want nobody to feel bad for me, from a place of empowerment, from a place of faith, and as a testament to what God can truly do in your life if you allow him to do it. And so a clarion call is not something that just sounds cute. If you've ever studied it biblically or even just in life, during medieval times, it was released to signify that, hey, we needed to get in motion. A lot of times it meant that the battle has now begun and we need to respond. And so biblically, a clarion call is often referred to when they would sound trumpets. And it's a call to action. It's not just a call to words. It's not just a call to empathy, but it is a call that means I need to stop what I'm doing because this can no longer wait. And so everywhere I go right now, and especially in the state that we're in America, I feel like we need to release a clarion call to compassion. There's no way that you can do this work. There's no way that you can be in this as rooted as it takes sometimes for us. And I mean the people who pour out and who do it. It'll drain you if you're really in it from an authentic place because you are a servant. And that means you have to stay low to lift other people up high. In order to do that, you've got to remain solid to a place of compassion. That is the only thing that will keep you in times when you want to cry, in times when funding is not there, in times when you're just tired. Because it's a lot listening to other people's problems. And if you like me, when you want to do it, but you don't have the money or you don't have the resources, and it toys on your heart sometimes, and you cry behind closed doors, or people need you for an answer and you don't have it, compassion is the only thing that will sometimes keep us rooted in being able to go on to the next day. But in a world that is designed to take your compassion, how do you maintain it? You maintain it from understanding that this is not a gift for me, but it is a gift for other people. And so I grew up in a rural Delta town in Mississippi, and my mother was in corrections. She had me very young. And in Mississippi, 9 out of 10 people's families are either incarcerated or they worked in corrections. Just going back when we go historically, they were trainable jobs. A lot of people didn't have the higher education degrees. So especially in my area, the Department of Corrections is the highest employer. And so I was always familiar with it. My mom was a guard. I had a cousin who was a guard, but it was never something that I thought that I would end up doing. And my grandmother at the time, my mom was young. She was 17 when she got pregnant. She was 18 when she had me. My mom always wanted to go to college. To my grandmother, it was unrealistic because you laid down and had a baby. So she told her, you're going to have to work. Ain't no such thing as you going to college because that's not my responsibility. You had her. So this is how my mom ended up in corrections. And I would always hear her come home and tell the stories of what she had seen and hear her experiences and then the frustration of wanting to go higher in the field of corrections, but not having the education. It went from being trainable jobs to, as we moved on, they wanted degrees. And so she wanted to be a case manager. She wanted to be a unit manager. But because she lacked that degree, the glass ceiling was always something that she fought. And so I grew up, like I said, hearing the stories. We watched Dateline, 48 Hours, Unsolved Mysteries. So I was always intrigued of why people did what they did. But going back to that grandmother again, she raised me in such a light that I had to do what she said do. It was the only way that I would be accepted as the black sheep in the family, because I'm darker than most of the people in my family. If you grew up in the South, you know, colorism is still a thing. My hair texture was different than most of my family. I'm a little bit more shapely than most of my family. She never let me forget that. So her way of reimagining and re-imaging who I was to give me the puzzle pieces, was to dress me a certain way, was to prim me and prop me of who to talk to, who to hang around, what school to go to, what to do, what to not like. And I began to be programmed for most of my life. And so it would take me going to college to finally break out of that mold. I listened to her. I went to school initially to be a physical therapist. Hated the medical field. Cared nothing about it. I was struggling, y'all. I mean, literally about to be on academic probation. But because I had to do what served her best, and I wanted that validation, I wanted that acceptance. My father was pretty much non-existent. He was in and out, but for the most part, alcohol has been his primary love, and women. So I always played secondary. My mom, though I love her dearly, she still was voided. She still was unhealed. So a lot of times I took a backseat to her personal relationships, her relationships with boyfriends, her relationships with trying to find her identity. So here I was, the only place I really found myself and had acceptance was with my great aunt. That's who raised me. But I still listened to my grandmother because she was the matriarch and I wanted her approval desperately. So I went on for 3 years. My junior year, going back again, I was literally at the point of being on academic probation. It was right before Christmas time, and I was just crying in the library, struggling hard trying to study when I was already basically failing, so it didn't matter what I did on the test anyway. I probably was still going to flunk the class. And I called my mom. My mom called my grandmama on three-way. And so they were both on the phone trying to convince me to come home. And so my mom was like, it's okay, Michel'Le, you know, just come home. You can go to Valley. That's the college that's like 15 minutes from my actual town. You don't have to be all the way up there struggling by yourself. And then my grandmama was on the phone and she was like, yeah, come home. And it was something in me that stood up. And I said, you know what? I'm down here struggling. She at home. I'm down here getting $60,000 worth of debt, going through hell and high water for a person that does not even understand what my day in and day out life is about, only for their approval. And when she said come home, it wasn't from a nurturing, caring place. It was from a place that said, I knew you would fail anyway. And so I decided after Christmas that I was going to do what I wanted to do for the first time in my life. I was no longer going to be her little puppet, and I was going to break out. So I changed my major to criminology. It was a fresh program at the time, and I graduated. And then bam, it started to push me into the direction of saying no longer will I allow strings and limitations to linger over my life. So when I came home, my mom was working at a prison at the time. She said, Michel'Le, they got an opening in alcohol and drugs. And so she opened the door essentially for me to start working at a prison. And so my grandmother lost her mind. She said, you got too much in you. You could have at least been a lawyer or something. But you want to be like your mama and work hard in a prison all your life and not have nothing. And when she said that, again, something rose up in me and said, I'm going to prove you wrong. And so I started on the journey of corrections. I came in to the Department of Corrections. I worked, like I said, in the private sector for a while, but I shifted over into the state agency, which is our local Department of Corrections. I started off as a contract worker. Initially, I was always the youngest person in the room. I had been trying to apply for so long with our Department of Corrections, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get a job, especially fresh out of college. Especially being that nobody's beating on the door to work in prisons, and I'm like, pick me. But every time I look up, application denied, application void, no phone call. So essentially when I came in, I realized it was because of the gatekeepers. It was because of the people who had been sitting those seats 20, 30 years, who didn't want to retire, who didn't want to release power, who didn't want to go home. So when the Lord let me come in as a contract worker, I came in on fire. I wanted to change everything. I saw everything that needed to be fixed. I had a lot of energy. That's what my boss always said. You got a lot of energy. And I did. I was vocal. I didn't shut my mouth in meetings. And so that didn't also make me too many friends either, because I realized some of these people are actually content with this. They are okay if nobody ever breaks out of this cycle of incarceration. They are okay if somebody never comes off drugs. They are okay doing what they do, collecting retirement and going home. And I made a decision, which then allowed me to start moving up the ladder at a very young age. I know it was nothing but God, and I credit him for it, but I began to be a trailblazer within that agency. I did things that most people never thought about doing. I did it with speed, and I did it with less resources or their support. So that also didn't make me too much of the favorite person in the room, because before you play with me about funding, I get it from a nonprofit. I get it from a community organization, because I knew what I had seen. You see, I had worked in a facility to where I saw them drop off 3,000 men and walk away with no resources, no programs. I had seen them play around with the pen positions where they said, we're going to get 10 alcohol and drug teachers. And they never got but 2. And so people who were court ordered for A&D couldn't go home or couldn't get the time off or couldn't get their kids back. I knew what that looked like when we sat in meetings for 2 or 3 hours and we had no follow through with the plans. And so instantly it began to just give me stamina. It began to give me energy. It began to give me drive. And it began to be the thing that fueled me to no longer be quiet and no longer live off limitations. And so then the Lord would think so highly of me to allow me to begin to shift into workforce development. And it was the same story every time I shifted positions within this Department of Corrections. I would see where we would break through in the area, but we wouldn't cross over. I would see where we would sit around tables and have conversations, but there would be no results in the end. And I couldn't understand, how can you go to sleep at night? Because I had become familiar with Joey's story and Marcella's story and Angie's story and Teresa's story and John's story. And by shifting through those different positions, it gave me perspective from every area. I'd like to credit myself and tell myself that I am the poster child when it comes to corrections, because I had worked in the community. And so I had heard from nonprofits. I had worked in probation and parole. I understood the loops in the hole when we don't communicate from the entire incarceration system of the inside to the outside. When probation and parole does not work with the institutions, and we just drop people off at the bus station with a ticket and say, go ahead on. And nobody even knows that they're coming. I had seen all of the holes that needed to be healed. And I couldn't keep being who I was and not try to push healing or even become a healer when I knew that I had watched the same God spare me. So every time I walked inside of those prison walls, I had 2 things in my mind. One was that I knew I wanted to be an agent of change. Number 2, I was going to prove my grandmama wrong. I was not going to work hard in the prison all my life and not bring out the fruit of my labor. I knew that there was no limits on me. I knew what was inside of me, and I knew I had been through too much. And see, the same system that I had fought so hard inside of, I had also been a victim of. I was married to a cop who was also a probation and parole officer. I had sat there and went through 5 years of domestic violence. And I watched the same system that was supposed to protect me turn against me. So I knew about injustice to some point in time. And I had felt the sprinkle of how big it could impact someone's life. And it had even got to a point to where I had made up my mind, y'all, that I was going to kill them dead. I was tired. I was broken. I had done everything that they say do. I filed reports. I went to his job. I told my bosses. I put it on social media. I went to my family and my friends. And there was nothing, no way that I could get out. And so one day I just said, you know what? I called my pastor and I said, I'm going to kill him dead. And I'm just going to go to prison. And that's going to be the only way I'm going to ever have some peace, because this system is not designed to help me. It's only hurting me. And the Lord would have it, that same alcoholic father would come by my house out of all of the days, walk straight in and shake me. And this would be the one thing that would snap me back into reality. And that's the only reason today I'm not number 625-432-10. So I have been in a dark place before. I knew I couldn't be judgmental. I had listened to people's story, and the same grace that had covered me, I vowed to give it and extend it to other people, because I wasn't so far from being the same person laying on those cots. And I also had had other run-ins in the past. I knew people. I had experiences. I had family members. So I couldn't understand how every single day we walk through these doors and we say that we love people, we say that we love Christ, But when it comes our chance to make change and to do things and be positive and give reinforcement, we were lacking it over and over again, all for the sake of a system. We had become so institutionalized and mechanicalized that we no longer cared that those lives were being affected. We had looked over the fact that people had now become properties of the state instead of purpose. Instead of taking these people, rehabilitating them, giving them the tools, building them back up, we were also playing a part in breaking them down again. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. It was happening daily. When you take off from work to miss an assignment, when you lingering behind on those emails, when you just don't care. And so it just started to frustrate me. It started to make me say, this can't go on anymore. How many other people can sit up and just be quiet? How many times do I have to sit here and watch people go and come? There was a young man named Sticky. And both of my children I've been pregnant with, so I like to tell people they were born in a prison. This is all they know. Sticky was there when I got married, when I got divorced, when I got pregnant, when I had my baby. He had become closer to me than my own brother. And something was wrong with that picture. It wasn't normal to be there during every season of my life, and I was a free person. And it was people like Sticky who I could not get out of the imagery in my head at night. So this began to make me want to say, hey, we can't stop here. We've got to do more, and we've got to create momentum. There's only one way that this can happen, through community, through connections, and most of all, through compassion. And so in order to become compassionate, I had to learn how to carry compassion. And for most of us, we know how to be compassionate. You hear a sad story, it pulls on your emotions. You can extend compassion. But to become compassionate means that you step outside of what that person has did. You step outside of the label on them. You step outside of the offense that has occurred. You step outside of the very thing that will make you be able to not want to connect. That is carrying compassion. It does not turn off. It's what makes you aware of seeing a homeless person in a crowd of 3,000 people. Because you recognize brokenness. Because you understand what uncertainty looks like. That's when you become compassionate. Because day in and day out, we're all so busy. And sometimes the weight of what we carry and the weight of these jobs will blind you to the fact that sometimes, even just in your sight and your vision, it'll make you start to have imagery that's not even there. I've seen people who no longer have a pure heart in this work. I've seen people who walk around blinded. And so you have to have clear eyes and a pure heart in order to continue to do the work, because the system is set up to do what it's doing. It's set up to drain us. It's set up to frustrate us. And it's set up to consistently keep these people going in and out. And you're going to need compassion to carry you from day to day when people shut the doors in your face, when people tell you it's not possible, when sometimes you see people who you know you poured into go right back in and do it again. And so this will be challenging over time. I thought once I got it, it was a one-stop shop. It was the lesson I learned. I was always, hey, how you doing? Nice, friendly. People came to me with advice. But the Lord would teach me there are levels to being compassionate. This is an in-depth thing. It's not a one-time fix. And so in 2020, my mom, she was going through a divorce. So she called me and she said, hey, Michel'Le, I need to stay with you for a little while. And I said, okay, I understand a pivot point. I had been through divorce myself. And I was honestly kind of excited because for the first time in my life, this was going to be our bonding moment. My great aunt raised me. I was around my mother, but never to the extent where we built relationship. And being honest and transparent, I held a lot of resentment towards her. Because like I said, she was searching for herself for most of my life. And so I took the short end of the stick. And so in my mind, I'm like, this is almost like, a redo-over, a rebrand for our relationship. We get the bond all over again. But the unhealed portion of her, she went into another relationship trying to fill that void. And so this time, as a correctional officer, someone who had been inside of the prisons for 30 plus years, she decided that she was going to do something new. And she ended up dating someone who was formerly incarcerated. And so in my mind, I never really thought twice about it because I don't judge. I came in on rehabilitation, second chances. You really can't make me believe that people cannot be redeemed. So I never once thought twice about who he was or what he had did. I didn't research it. I didn't ask anybody. I just knew that he was a new person around. I was going to respect him, make my kids respect him, and okay. And so I would begin to watch her go into this relationship and slowly change. The same pain that she was already harboring, it became more surface level. The same anger, the same issues, the same resentment. Because believe it or not, what you don't settle in one season, it will become another lesson in another season. As I have seen this pattern before, bad men, bad relationships, and I wanted healing so much for her. But you got to understand, just like we do in this work, you can want it for that person, but unless they have it in them to do it, it's not possible. All we can do is plant seed and keep watering. The work has to be done from the inside out. And so I didn't stand there in a judgmental spot, but I stood there as an intercessor, as a prayer warrior. I stood there as her daughter who just knew what brokenness looked like, who knew what wanting validation looked like, who knew what some of those younger versions of me was harboring in her, but she was just older. And I desperately wanted that for her. And so it started off pretty good. They would dress alike and go to events together, and he was nice. And then she started to bring him around my house. And so I would notice little things like when he came to eat one day, and instead of eating his food on the table, he would back his chair away from the table, put his food on the ground, and hover over and eat it. And she said, "Hey, you're not in prison anymore? Put that food on the table and eat." Okay. Never said anything, didn't think twice about it, because I understand. Then there was another situation where he had gotten a speeding ticket, and he was so nervous, and he was so angry, and he was so scared that he was going back to prison. Like, hey, it's just a stop sign ticket. You didn't go 80 and a 25, like you just ran a stop sign. You just pay your fine and that's it. So, okay. And then there was another situation where he said some things to me that were kind of inappropriate. But I didn't speak on it because I didn't want to say anything to my mom. I didn't want to ruin her new happiness. I just said, you know what? I'm going to mind my business and I'm going to let it go with the flow. And so I did this for approximately 6 months. I mind my business. Even though I saw that healing needed to take place, I could see where she was distracted. I could see where she wasn't herself. I just remained quiet because I didn't want to ruin what was already not there. And I prayed and I wanted so desperately for us to have this rebranding, this reconnection. I prayed and I wanted so much for us to have this compassionate moment as women empowering each other who have been through divorce, and we could do this together. But that moment never came. And so I sat on the sidelines, I stayed silent, and I kept doing my life. I went into work, I served, I came home. And so October 20th, 2020, I had the most amazing day at work. I mean, the sun was shining. Nobody got in any fights. If you've ever been inside of a prison, it was just peaceful. And it was something just different in the atmosphere. So when I clocked out and I went home, I just went home just saying, hey, today is going to be a normal day. And my brother at the time, my mom had lost custody of my brother during her divorce. So my brother was living with his dad, but randomly, and he was a teenager at the time, he was 16 years old. He called me, he said, hey, I want to come to your house. This was strange. He never wants to come to my house, but this particular day, he asked to come to my house. So I left work and I went and got him. And he came to my house. And so he and Kinsley were sitting in her room. I was washing clothes, and my youngest daughter, McKenna, she was just running around the house. So all of a sudden, there was a knock on the door. Boop, boop, boop. So my brother goes to the door, and it's my mom's boyfriend. So he says, hey, I'm looking for her. I want to talk to her. We had a fight, and I was trying to see if she made it home yet. So I'm like, no, she's not here yet. I'll let her know that you came by. I'll tell her to call you. Didn't think anything of it. And so I continued on with my day, cleaning my house. And for some reason, I just really wanted to go to the store. If any of y'all are bargain shoppers, that is my guilty habit. And so we had a store that I was notorious for going in 6 and 7 times a week. And I had the urgency on my heart this day to go to that store. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to load a load of clothes, and then I'm going to go to the store. So I went down to my back patio, which is where my washer and dryer was, and I loaded clothes. I heard the most gut-wrenching scream come out of McKenna that I had ever heard in my life. And so when I looked out the back patio, McKenna was coming down the stairs where I was, and she was shaking and she was screaming. And y'all have seen how bright she is, but she was livid red. And so when she got down to the stairs to me, she was just stuttering. She couldn't really get the words out of her mouth. And when I looked up, my mom's boyfriend was standing on the steps with a gun. And he said, put the clothes down and come in the house. And so by that time, I'm saying, what's going on? What's going on? What are you doing? He said, shut up. Where's everybody else? So he gathered Kinsley and my brother out of her room. He took me and McKenna, and he put us all in the bathroom. He took our cell phones. He made my brother at the time, who was 16, strip down to his boxers. I placed Kinsley and McKenna inside the bathtub. I sat on the toilet, and my brother was on the ground. He said, I want y'all to know, as long as y'all don't get involved, y'all will live. But the minute that you try to do anything crazy, I'm going to kill y'all too. And so me at the time, being the oldest, I was 30, I said, you know what? I got too much Holy Ghost in me. I trust God too much. I knew what it was like to de-escalate people at the worst time. That was my gift in corrections. So the part of me that had taught anger management, the part of me had taught rehabilitation classes, it stood up. And so I'm talking, and I'm trying, and I'm talking, and I'm trying, and nothing is working. And so the other part of me that just believes in God, like I don't carry faith. I carry the gift of faith. I really walk around like a big bad wolf because I just feel covered by God. That part of me stood up. And so I'm preaching, and I'm telling him about repentance. And I'm reminding him of all of the things in the 6 months that he has accomplished. Because on paper, he had the job. On paper, he had the supportive family. On paper, he had the transportation. On paper, he was supposed to be a winning success story. But here we were again, after 30 years of incarceration, back in the same situation. And so I'm constantly trying to talk to him. I'm constantly trying to pray. I'm constantly trying to figure out, God, why are you letting this happen to my family? This is not making sense. And so we stayed with him for about 2 hours, locked up in the bathroom. And everything that I could think of, I did. And finally, my mom called. So he said, don't touch the phone. I said, okay. He put the gun to my side, and he said, call her back. He said, if you say anything that's going to warn her or trigger her, then I'm going to kill you. I said, okay. So I called my mom back. She started asking questions, you know, the regular stuff. Have you eaten? You want me to bring food home? And I just kept saying, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If you know me and my mom don't talk like that. I was respectful, but I never said yes, ma'am. So I just kept saying, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Until finally she said, what's wrong with you? Because she knew this wasn't how I talk. And I was like, nothing. She said, okay, I'll be home in like 15 minutes. And so when she came home, she had a Camaro. It was red. You could hear when she hit the park. Chirp, chirp. So she chirp, chirp. And I knew then, I said, God, if you're ever going to show up for me in life, this is the moment where I need you to show up like never before. It doesn't matter about nothing else I prayed at that point. Not a house, not a car, not a nothing else. This is the time I need you to show me that you are who you say you are. And so she came through the phone. She was notorious for talking to her homegirls after work. That was her detox. She came through the house, and she was on the phone. And instantly, he took the gun, and he pistol whooped her. He hit her upside the head. So she was in the living room, and she kept screaming, where's my family? Where's my family? He kept on whooping her with the gun until finally he brought her where we were. He told her to get on the ground. And so she began to plead for our lives. Don't worry about me. At least let them go. Let them go outside. Make sure they're straight. This is between me and you. He didn't care. He continuously went on and went on and went on. So after about 15 minutes of her trying, he shot her. So the first shot, he shot her on her side. And she kept pleading, and she kept begging, and she kept asking him to let us go. She didn't care at that point. She asked him to take her outside. She asked him to take her in the front room because she just didn't want us to see it. And so he got agitated with her asking for our freedom. So then he shot her again in the knees. And so then he made me get up and get a towel and wrap up her knees. And so she kept asking, like, just take me to the hospital. I won't tell them you did this. Just drop me off at the hospital. I just need something for the pain. It's burning. And so at the same time, I'm constantly trying to pull the shower curtains back because though Kinsley and McKenna, I can't hide it from them. I just don't want them to see this. And so at that point in time, Kinsley was holding McKenna, and I kept trying to stand in the way of them because he kept making me pull the curtain back. He had already made up in his mind this was going to be a terror show. Not only was she going to suffer, but we were going to suffer too. So it wasn't that I was so happy about having my life, but I understood that you would rather me live in torment, and that was the reason why you were letting me live. And so she continuously asked for her life. She continuously asked for our life. And then my phone just kept ringing. So I have this one aunt. Everybody got a crazy aunt in their family. But this is my one aunt. She stayed in everybody's business. She'll pop up over your house. She'll call you whenever. This particular day, this one aunt was adamant about finding us and getting in touch with us. So she had called my phone several times. She called Kinsley's phone. She called my brother's phone. And when she couldn't make communication, she began to go on her own voyage. She called my mom's phone. She couldn't get away with it. She couldn't, it just wouldn't let off her. So finally she flagged down a police officer and she said, I'm going to Michel'Le's house. So in the midst of her on the way, not knowing that all of this was transpiring, he began to release all of the bullets that were in his gun. He shot my mom dead center mass over 20 times. And so then he gave me the gun and he said, I'm ready to go back to prison now. You can call the police. He took out his cell phone. He called his mom. And his exact words was, Mama, I killed Angie. I just want you to know I love you, but I'm getting ready to go back. And so I had to wrap towels around Kinsley and McKenna's face and drag them over my mom's body. And I pushed them out the front door. And immediately when we got to the front door, lo and behold, that crazy auntie had the police standing there waiting. And it was nothing but an act of God because he had parked his car in the alley behind my house and he was going to run. But as soon as he opened the door to leave, the police was standing there and my aunt was standing there too. And so for the first time in my life, I had my worlds collide, my professional and my personal. And everybody was wondering what I was going to do because I'm Miss Second Chance in my state, in my community. This is what I preach, I teach. This is my life. My children have grown up behind closed bars. They got plenty of aunties and uncles who've been in the system. This is all we know. I could not understand, God, why would the very thing that gave me fire and fuel to stay alive, you would put me in a situation that would not only test my compassion, but test my character. It would not only be the thing that would pull me into a whole nother dimension, but it would also turn around and give me the very thing that gave me purpose. And so I said, having to make a decision, was I going to go back to work? And after 20 days, I told myself, I said, you know what, Michel'Le? It would be less than a legacy lived if you didn't go back. Because on my path to healing and on my path to forgiveness, you know what I had seen? I found out that I wasn't mad at Daryl. I was mad at the system. Because after 30 years, if your initial instinct is to go right back to that in a moment of rejection, in a moment of anger, you would never heal. And I had met too many incredible people learning, having a life sentence, who had been in prison, who I knew deserved to come home. And so I made a choice to not let one person take me away from the very work that I knew that God had ordained for me. I watched my daughter, who never cared to tell people her mama worked in a prison, become proud because she sat around a group of lifers and listened to them fight their cases. And now she wants to be a defense attorney. I sat there and watched the very thing that I rejected, which was, I always made note, I don't want to work in a women's facility. They crazy, y'all. They do too much fighting. But I watched God give me a 2-year bid in a women's prison that gave me and my family the healing that we needed. I watched him do things with me that I never thought was imaginable because I chose compassion over anything else. I chose courage. I chose to keep going on in the midst of the very system that was set out to destroy others that had now set out to destroy me. And so I learned that forgiveness was not for me. I learned that compassion was not for me. It's only the extension. I learned that compassion and courage and community are needed in this work. And if we don't ever put those 3 elements together, this is how true recidivism happens. I learned that we needed compassionate judges and lawyers and caseworkers. I learned that we needed compassionate police officers, that we needed compassionate families. Because the thing was, on paper, he had all of what we call the credentials, but there was still something in the inner him lacking. And that's a conscious decision at the end of the day. But in a system that's designed not to give it to you, that means we got to meet the needs on the outside. That means people have to rise up to the occasion and go the extra mile to make sure that it happens. to make sure that our communities are truly safe, as they like to say. This is how you reduce crime. It starts with doing the inner work. It starts with taking that mantle and pushing it. It starts with creating momentum in places like this, in rooms like this. It starts with not only just ideas, but conversations. It starts with creating safe spaces. It starts with us not only being talkers, but being walkers and doers of the very work that we say is what we wear as a badge of honor sometimes. And so I challenge, and I also charge you today. What situations do you need to go back to with compassionate eyes? What people? What organizations? Because in a world that's designed to make your heart cold, the only thing that is going to keep it warm is carrying compassion. Outside of what you face, inside of the walls or outside of the walls, outside of your day in and day out life, and it's staying committed to the call of service. And so I charge you today to go back to your communities. I challenge you today to go back being bigger, to being better, to being unstoppable, to being on fire. I challenge you today to open your mouth and tell your story, because it's so easy for people to try to discredit you. But you never let people oppress you and cage you. And I refuse to live that life. So if I have to step outside on my own to expose what goes on in Mississippi, to talk about the issues, to represent the people that I know I built community with, then that's what I'm going to do. But the same God that carried me through that same situation is the same God that's carrying me now, and that will continue to carry me. So I thank you all for listening to me. I thank you all for even being here today. Kayla told the story, but I was just a curious person who wanted to, I like being in a room. That's my quote. I just love to be in a room. I love to be in a room with people that I know carry the same purpose and heart posture as me. And I instantly connected with her. And I saw the pictures on Facebook when she said, you know, we probably can't do it. We're not physically there this year. I said, God will provide. And so we are in this room today because she took the seed of faith that I gave her, but she ran with it and she trusted him in the midst. And I can truly say this room is community. This room feels like family. It feels like a family reunion with people that I didn't know I was related to, but after today I am. I thank you all. I appreciate every single connection that I'm going to have, that I've already had. And if there's anything that I can do, if there's any way I can serve, if there's any way my kids can do anything, because they are also involved in this work. My family will serve. My family will go forth in being change makers. It came with the birth certificate over my life for some reason. So they don't really get a choice in the work. But I thank you all, and I hope you all truly take something from this conference and enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of the atmosphere that we have here, and let's connect and let's change things one community at a time, one conversation at a time, and also with compassion being the heart posture and at the forefront of what we're doing. So thank y'all.